Of course I
Hello,
do.
Barbara. Lovely to see you.
Yes, it's
How are
great.
you?
I've enjoyed all day. Um,
Good.
I do have something to share, so let me see if
That's
I
all right. We're a little bit early, so if people are coming in just to see you, we won't start for another few minutes if that's all right.
oh, okay,
If
I'll
you don't
just hang
mind.
loose.
So just come and talk to me for a bit.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Well,
Right.
what I'm going to do before well, no, I'll just wait.
Well, you can share your screen now if you like, and we can get that bit ready.
Well, it's interesting to reflect on some of the themes. I've been taking notes all day.
Mm,
Some of the ideas that came across in a number of different presentations.
yeah.
And I was actually going to integrate those into my presentation, but I could go ahead and talk about some of those now if
That
you,
would be lovely. That would be lovely, actually. Let's do that. Well, yeah, that would be
okay.
a great filler, Barbara. Well done.
Well, it's interesting
Just a
because I
quick
have,
hi, Bob.
Oh,
Hello and welcome.
thank you. Thank you, Daryl.
Look forward to chatting tomorrow.
Yeah,
Okay.
early. Not as early as today, though.
No, 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 no.
what ridiculous time are you at the minute?
Oh, it's not bad. It's 10 in the morning for me.
Oh, that's
Just
fine.
the getting up time that wasn't real good.
Having been here all night, yeah, yeah. You'll be ready for bed now.
Well, I've already eaten 14 meals and it's mid-morning, so I don't know. Um, so there were a couple of repeating ideas, and I can't begin to capture all of them because I have pages of notes, but some of the things that really resonated with me was that everyone seemed to recognize the real reason why we do this. And that's the students, the inquirers, that's the core of everything we do. David Harold just talked about the joy and giving that joy of learning to every student who goes through school is there's no better reason to be a teacher or to be involved in any of this. And several people mentioned the importance of preparing our inquirers for the future. I think we think about that a lot. And I saw all through here the integration of the types of skills that students need to succeed in the real world and the connection to the real world through the various projects that people have described, that it's not just a rote understanding of what's in the curriculum, but inspiring and empowering students to pursue the real world connections, the authenticity that enables them then to transfer across subjects, to transfer to life after and beyond school. So I thought that came across really well. The importance of connecting to a liberal education, that we're in this for education, for a liberal education, and the kinds of values and beliefs and skills that we're teaching through inquiry are the ones that are going to firm up the foundation of liberal education. There were several notes on how, and that's another part of my presentation. So let me just briefly capture some of the ones. Several people said it's important to have a model, and it's not necessarily one model, it's a model, so that you have a consistent message in your school so that you can start to build, and this is another important thing, start to build a whole school perspective on inquiry and a whole school model. And we certainly saw the importance of administrator support from at AKS Lytham. That makes all the difference. And so several of you talked about the conversation among the librarian or teacher librarian and the staff and administrators, and pulling together as a whole school around a model that gives it precision and direction and is easier for people to get their minds around. everybody was really aware, though, that you don't just accept a model that has been presented and then plop it on the school. And so we had several sessions where people, I just loved the exploration of everyone who presented, because that's what we're all trying to do, is to figure out how to personalize it for these students, these inquirers, this school, this community, and make it resonate and help our students succeed. There's not a one size fits all, in
No.
other words. And the joy for us as educators is figuring out what is that magic formula for my particular school.
Yeah.
So we saw the importance of a whole school approach, and gosh, there were so many good examples, connecting to what's already being done, building on the curriculum that is already in place, integrating skills, direct instruction of skills, but integrating those throughout the curriculum and giving teachers the opportunity to say, oh, I see how the literacy curriculum would apply to geography or to something else. That's brilliant. And then finally, one thing that really resonated for me was the importance of reflection. And it was reflection not just by students, which needs to be integrated throughout the process, but also by teachers. And
Yeah.
so many of the presenters today, their whole presentation was a reflection.
Yeah.
That's hard to do as an educator. You want to have a set way to do it, and takes too much energy to now redo it for the next year. But that made a lot of sense, and I think everyone who does that regularly improves practice and
Absolutely.
improves student results every year.
I would agree. I think, it's really important that actually as an educator or a librarian, you are prepared to do the inquiry that you are asking your students to do. So I think somebody mentioned creating a good question was really difficult. But how often do we have to create a good question? It's like it's really not that easy. So actually to go through the process and reflect on it with them is a great way to move forward. It is, yeah. It's been a fascinating day. And thank you. I want to see your notes though. That will be a reflection in itself, Barbara. Okay, I'm going to let you share your screen now if you don't mind, and we'll get on with your presentation.
Okay. I'm getting there.
It's gone black, but hopefully in a minute it will pop up. It's got to come a long way, hasn't it? There you
Yeah.
go. Okay, so you're not on presentation mode yet.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying. There we go.
Yeah, there you go. You're all well. Off you go. Thank you.
All right, so what I'm offering are reflections that I've been going through over the past several years. As many of you know, I've been engaged in thinking about inquiry for a number of years, but I never stopped thinking and I never stopped learning, because you never get to the end. So I wanted to just share with you some of my own reflections and some of the directions that I'm going in the future. The first question that I always ask is why? Why inquiry? What does it do? Why am I so passionate about it? And of course, I think all of us think that the important piece is the impact on the learners. And I've been surprised that some teachers who I've worked with don't focus on the learners. They focus on the curriculum and on the content. And I understand that. If you're a classroom teacher, you have certain curriculum content you have to make sure students at least know about or are aware of. But librarians are free to talk about the impact of inquiry on learners. And that is such a freeing thing and so empowering for us. these are examples of what I've heard from students that I've worked with. Second grader reading all the books in the library about American presidents and then sharing with me, you can ask me anything you want because I've read all these books and I'm an expert. And to me, that is kind of a mantra for what I want to happen for every student. And students take great pride. I know how to learn on my own, which they are not always expected to do. So when a student recognizes that he can do that and feels proud of it, we have succeeded. I love being able to listen to my friends' ideas and express my own ideas. And that gets to the idea of inquiry as conversation, as an opportunity for students to share their expertise. These are some of the characteristics that I have noticed and read about of student empowerment through inquiry. Several of you all mentioned challenge. Yes, it is challenging. So what do we do to support that? Kids like to be challenged. They don't want to be bored. And this is an opportunity to let them pursue that challenge by making choices of what they're interested in pursuing. The whole idea of exportable expertise is something that I've read about for years. And what that means is that kids, they are experts. And it's interesting how often they can drop that knowledge into a conversation because they know about sports scores and they can drop that in, and it's a source of pride. They develop confidence and competence. Inquiry gives students a chance to have voice. That's not in all of our schools. They get that in socializing with other students, in making presentations, in expressing ideas in the classroom, in the library, and outside. And finally, one that I'm really concerned about is cultural responsiveness. We're going to talk more about that. So the next question, okay, I understand why I'm doing this, so how? And that's where I really put a lot of my work. We've talked a little bit about the Empire State Information Fluency Continuum. I started out with a research process way back in 1988 or something. And first time I published my inquiry model was 2003. I have continued to develop. I work with librarians in New York City to develop the the New York City Continuum and then the Empire State Continuum. So I've done a lot of work in how, but what I wanted to focus on now is a deeper reflection. And what are the new questions that I have? What am I pursuing now? Some of you all may say, well, she's definitely flunked retirement. And that's a true statement. I can't turn it off because there's so much left to do. So let me share with you some of the questions that I am pursuing now that I'm thinking about. And I'm going to just share with you briefly some of the things that I'm trying to develop. First of all, I'm increasingly aware of how important inquiry is to lift up the whole child. And I loved the importance of the whole school, but I can't pull out now, but several of you, profiles of a learner, others have you've obviously integrated the whole child idea into your teaching, and I'm working on that as well. What do our learners look like as they develop whole child attributes over time? I've always been really interested in a continuum because it's not fair to students to set this standard, but then not give them the opportunity to succeed as they develop along the continuum to reach an end standard, if there's any end. So that's what the ESIFC is. It's what I think about. How can I help students at second grade feel successful? What are my expectations for them? And it just helps in instruction and for student confidence and student development. How can librarians transform their teaching to engage and empower their learners? And I'm in the United States. So in most places in the United States, I would say most, librarians are teachers. That's not true internationally, I think. But I think everyone recognizes the importance of teaching. And so sometimes our personal inquiry may be, how can I be a better teacher? Which even if you have a background in teaching, you think about. But we have to teach in a different way from the way we were taught, probably. Many of us went through didactic education. That's not what we're talking about. And so becoming familiar with the skills of inquiry and then how do you teach them is something I continue to explore. How can we foster the idea of inquiry as a continuing conversation? And that's what this is. That's what this forum is. That's what Daryl and I work on. We've been having weekly conversations for 4 years now. We never run out of things to talk about because we are having a continuing conversation and trying to figure it out. And what questions will lead us to the future of inquiry-based teaching and learning? And that's the final thing that we'll talk about. In 2021 or 2019, sometime, I worked with a group of librarians in New York City. My idea was that if we don't know where we're going, we're going to wind up somewhere else, this famous saying. And I thought we needed to picture, what do we want our students to look like? And as I was thinking about the whole child, there are a number of facets that are important, attributes. Certainly independent learning competencies and fluencies, and those are the skills of inquiry that we spend a lot of time thinking about and developing. I think through inquiry, our students can develop a strong self-identity. They can figure out who they are, what their strengths are, who their family is, how they fit in, who they want to be. I hope that all of our students develop voice and agency, and we're going to talk about that a little more, that all of our students develop cultural responsiveness. And I'm not just saying cultural awareness, I'm saying responsiveness. And we all have a responsibility then to act in a way that is culturally responsive. Social and emotional learning attributes, and several of you mentioned feeling and what feelings do you have during inquiry. This is really a little different. It's not feelings about the process of inquiry. It is understanding your feelings about the world, maybe about the subject that you're studying, about what you have to accomplish, how you fit in with other students, how comfortable you are in the environment, how safe you feel, how much you belong in the learning environment of the library. And finally, a growth mindset, and several of you talked about that idea of a growth mindset, and certainly we need that for ourselves as well as for our students. An example, here's just a specific what we might include in independent learning. The students need to develop a motivation to learn on their own, and this is what we just heard about, the joy of learning, of honoring their own curiosity. How many students do we know? I don't know, I have a K-12 perspective, so I have seen in middle school students stop asking questions. They just want to learn what they're told to learn and get it done and then go on to their own thing. So we have some work to do there. Self-confidence in their own ability to learn. And that is our students saying, I can do this. I can take a risk, fail, and then come back at it and succeed. Ability to take a stance. And this is a personal important thing for me. I was really tired. The reason that construct is in my model is that I was tired of my students getting information and then putting it into a product. And they never put their own minds to it. They never developed their own opinions, drew a conclusion, constructed a line of argument. And so it really transformed my teaching when I started thinking about, I'm teaching students how to take a stance. Another attribute, we talked about choice, voice, agency, personalizing, and you can see we've talked about these in a number of different areas. The voice is absolutely having the confidence to present their own opinion, and several of you talked about the celebration of learning that you enabled your students to do. That is exactly what you're doing. You're giving them the chance to shine based on their own expertise. And agency goes a little beyond voice. It is, yes, having self-confidence, but self-confidence to make an impact, that what you say matters. It's not just, I know this information, but I know this information. It is important for you to know this information, and together we can make it better. So the second question that I wanted to address is, what do our learners look like as they continue development? And I'm talking specifically about the whole child attributes. So what we did in New York City was we developed profiles of our learners at grade 2, 5, 8, and 12, based around the attributes that I talked about. Here's a second grade learner. We developed visuals so that it's easy for teachers and librarians to grab hold of it. So what is second graders expected to do in terms of strong self-identity? Well, they need to understand their own strengths and the importance of their own voice. And when they do that, they can lead by example. They have confidence in themselves. They're social and emotional. They take actions and help build community by paying attention to my own feelings and the feelings of others. And how often do we enable kids to be sensitive to the feelings of others? It's their natural inclination, and we can teach them how to be more responsive. A growth mindset. I am in charge of myself. I'm excited about taking risks and following my own curiosity to learn new things. In grade 5, we build on that, and the independent learning is asking questions of value to myself and my community. And we ask students to extend their vision to beyond school and what's happening with their families, their community, and what would they like to investigate. Cultural responsiveness, engage in different conversations, and respect cultural differences and seek diverse opinions. Now that's pivotal. Even adults don't do that. Sometimes I don't do that. I don't want to hear the other side. I already know what I think. And so we can teach our students in school, and hopefully by osmosis, we'll be teaching parents to seek diverse opinions. By 8th grade, we've built these attributes, the social and emotional. We're expecting students to build trusting relationships with diverse peers and adults. And we do that by enabling them to collaborate and communicate and respect differences. And the strong self-identity, if you all have ever taught middle schoolers, that's a huge piece of what we need to do for middle schoolers. They are at their most vulnerable in those years. So help them develop the aspects of personal identity that are the most satisfying, identity confirming, and culturally responsive. And there are ways to integrate these skills, we're going to talk about it, ways to integrate these skills into the teaching of inquiry without doing a separate, now we're going to talk about self-identity. It's integrated. Students need to develop a great deal of confidence in their ability to express themselves. Hard for middle schoolers, but we can build environments, as some of you all have done, enabling students to present what they know and answer questions. And the growth mindset is important because it includes persistence and exploring possibilities for the future. We need kids to start thinking about, okay, what's after grade 12? Where am I going? And what value am I building now that will enable me to succeed? Finally, 12th grade, which is kind of the culmination, and hopefully every one of our inquirers is developing these abilities. I am empathetic. I maintain healthy and mature relationships with my peers and my community. Receptive to new ideas, see mistakes and challenges to my own assumptions as new opportunities to learn. I find I have to challenge myself to do that. I have assumptions and I don't always confront them. So that's an important skill for adults as well as for students. And certainly we want to set our students up to use information and technology throughout their lives. We want to build lifetime learners. And I do want to mention one thing about independent learning. I've developed an inquiry stance. Now, an inquiry stance is different from just knowing an inquiry process and following it. It is having that kind of curious question asking, self-confidence, information seeking, constructing meaning mindset that you bring to everything that you learn. And that's my goal for all of our students. So how can we transform our teaching? I think a lot about that. We heard today the importance of fostering the commitment of the whole school to the inquiry stance, and I've talked about that just a little bit. We need to build caring relationships with teachers and students. A lot of that is built on trust, and it's not just trust that our students trust us to offer the kinds of education and assessment that empowers them, but it's also we trust our students to be inquirers. We let them pursue their questions. We push them to make their own opinions and back it up with evidence. We, of course, need to plan. Collaboration is essential. We can't have separate programs in the library, and we're doing inquiry from 10 to 10:15 on Tuesdays. We need to integrate throughout, and that's done through careful collaboration. I found one of the most transformative things I did in planning with teachers was shifting my question when we're getting ready to plan a unit from what are your objectives, which is what we were taught in education classes, to saying, what would you like your students to learn? And it totally changed the conversation and empowered teachers to talk in real English, to let us know and build on what they most wanted students to learn. And it wasn't ABC of the content curriculum. They had ideas about what they really wanted students to learn. And finally, our teaching is essential, and all of us recognize our important role in teaching. Now, I said that I really think about the continuum. And so I've just kind of pulled out the independent learning competencies. So it goes from grade 2, kids setting goals for their own learning and finding facts and understanding the difference between fact and opinion, to asking questions of value not only to myself, but also my community, and gather, evaluate, and interpret information to answer questions. And then grade 8, it's really taking charge of the learning and seeking diverse perspectives, challenging misinformation, forming conclusions, being independent. And finally, grade 12, it is really a mindset of an inquiry stance and the willingness and the motivation to pursue new ideas and questions, to recognize the integral power of inquiry to their lives. And maybe they don't go through the whole process, of course they don't. But even if they're in the investigative mode, they want to find out about soccer or whatever, they have questions, and they recognize that they are seeking information to answer a question, and that they're going to have to make up their own mind what's important and what different people are saying. This is the same thing, and you all will get a copy of the slides, so I don't need to go through these, but the social and emotional attributes are really important. And I'm somewhat bothered by, in the United States, many schools pay attention to that by doing a social emotional skill of the month. And that has no impact. It's the integration into the learning process that really, really makes a difference. And so that's what these attributes are all about. The cultural responsiveness, there is a building, even though we set a 5th grade standard, quote unquote standard, I engage in difficult conversations, respect cultural differences, and seek diverse opinions. You can see here that in 3rd grade, we teach them to contribute to group discussions, form their own opinion, use evidence, engage in conversation. 4th graders then can begin to contrast 2 points of view, to compare, note their differences and similarities, and then look at evidence for each point of view and form their own opinion. By the time they get to 5th grade, then they can be taught the qualities of empathy, to identify, respect, and empathize with perspectives of others, and exchange ideas with a willingness to change their own opinion. Well, that's pretty powerful. And you can see how you don't want to leap to 5th grade. You've got to start in 3 and 4 and 5. And when teachers become familiar with this, it doesn't all have to happen in the library. These are easily integrated into classroom learning as well. The attributes are also aligned horizontally, and I'm going to be brief about this. This is something I'm working really strongly on right now. But if you're reading a story, for example, and this is not even legitimately a whole inquiry project, it is bringing inquiry into reading a story to kids. There are definitely independent learning competencies finding facts and fact and opinion in the story that you read. But also it's students you can bring in. It's important for them to recognize what their reaction is to the story and to be able to verbalize it and be able to change their ideas if somebody else has a different take on the story that makes sense to them. And so just reading the story, we have already cut across 3 different attributes and built them into a one-day lesson. The multiple attributes that we can do through combining inquiry with cultural responsiveness, to me, that is absolutely essential. That's an essential piece of inquiry that we need to be sure that our students are looking for multiple perspectives. They're paying attention to their own and others' cultural backgrounds. They're asking questions that are based in their community that are relevant to the people around them, and to assess bias, power, and privilege. We need to have those conversations, and we need to talk about the words that they may not have encountered, bias, power, and privilege, yet those are things they need to be thinking about at grade 8. So how can we foster inquiry as a continuing conversation? Well, I've already told you that Daryl and I have been working for 4 years with weekly conversations. But now we've made the big leap, and we have developed a book proposal, which Daryl talked about earlier. We're calling it Teaching Inquiry as Conversation, Bringing Wonder to Life. We know that the basis of really figuring out about inquiry and exploring it is conversation. That's the whole basis of this symposium. It's the whole basis of the Institute. That conversation, that back and forth, just think of everything we learned today from all of the presentations. And I know all of you all were taking notes and you were going, oh, that might work for me, or, oh, well, I'd have to change it this way, which is perfect. So we thought we'd give you just a little bit of the structure that we're doing. We're mid-process writing, and both of us are going, oh, writing is hard. Chapter 1, we do connect inquiry to liberal education, and there are lots of things that we need to provide as a foundation for why inquiry. This is an essential piece of inquiry. And then why is inquiry more like a conversation than a research process? And we have some ideas to bring our conversation in. We're starting each chapter with a conversation between us on a little piece of the chapter. And we're going to, hopefully, if our publisher will let us, interject conversation points, questions throughout each chapter. Chapter 3, what were the thought processes that drove the formation of the Stripling model and the FOSIL model? And so we've just tried to boil down, synthesize some of the factors that were influential in our own development. If I think about it, I developed my thought by going out into other fields of education and really researching authentic assessment and various other things before I could bring it all together into the Stripling model. Chapter 4, what skills and responsibilities are embodied in inquiry, and thinking about the digital age. And certainly many of the same skills are important, but there are some new skills that are essential. And we know our kids are digital, but they aren't necessarily applying the skills that they need to get good information and make good decisions based on what they see. Why should we think of inquiry as a whole child approach to learning? Well, I've already given you my pitch on that. I'm pretty passionate about it, and I'm going to keep working on it. Chapter 5 is what I'm working on right now. So if you all want to send me all the information, maybe I can write a better chapter. Chapter 6 is about teaching inquiry. And we have so many good examples today. So we're going to try to capture some of those main ideas. Certainly, Jenny and Daryl have powerful ideas about how to teach inquiry in branchland and in their previous experience. But there are other things we're going to draw on that will help people not be overwhelmed. See, that's the problem with the Empire State Information Fluency Continuum. That's my problem. And I know you all say, oh, poor Barb, she just builds too many models. But I know there are huge amounts of skills in the ESIFC. I know that. And I thought through it all, and it's very carefully constructed. But you can't teach all of those skills. Even if you were a magician, you couldn't teach all of those skills. So a piece of the teaching of inquiry is the personalizing that we talked about. And there are specific things that are most important for your students. There are priority skills. And how can you present those priority skills in a way that not only you can teach in an integrated way, but you can also assess. So in the ESIFC, there are lots of graphic organizers. We saw some graphic organizers today that were fabulous. And so that's a piece of the teaching. Why is there no magic formula for teaching inquiry? Well, we're going to dive into it a little bit, and that has to do with the personalizing and really developing something based on where we want our students to end up. What's the role of collaboration? And we know that's absolutely essential. What I trouble over is what I've heard from librarians here in the US is, well, I would collaborate, but nobody will work with me. Well, that is not an acceptable excuse. You got to figure out how to make that collaboration work. And you've got to build collaborative units and present them to teachers and say, let's do this, and get them involved. It's on us. We've got to be leaders, and we don't sit around and wait for people to come in and say, oh, would you collaborate with me? No, we're going after it and we're leading. What guidelines and strategies lead to effective teaching inquiry as conversation? How are we doing on time? Are we okay, Elizabeth?
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Okay, good. And so we're going to try to develop some tools that will help people. And both of us have already developed a lot of guidelines and strategies, and we want to share it and make it very practical so that people can adapt or adopt as works for them. And finally, our last chapter is how do we create broad buy-in to teaching and learning through inquiry? We have a lot of examples from today, certainly administrative support, conversations with teachers and administrators and parents. All of those are essential. We have to be advocates, but it's not advocacy for the sake of advocacy. You love my library because it's a library. You have to talk about the impact on students and let people see the actual results. So those schools that actually produce graphic organizers that kids can share with their parents, that produce the books that have all of the projects of the students that then students can have for the rest of their life, and I bet they will. There are other ways to demonstrate, to show student success with inquiry and the power of inquiry to produce lifelong learners. So that's our book at this point, but we're only a third of the way through writing it. So we've got work to do. So let's talk just briefly about what's next. I think about this a lot. I told you I always have questions. But now here are some new questions that I think we might need to confront. What are the implications of artificial intelligence in terms of ethics, in terms of independent thought, in terms of inquiry skills? I just read an article about the impact of artificial intelligence on the ability to think. Now, I already had thought about AI in terms of plagiarism and in terms of not thinking, just taking the place of thinking. But this particular article just really brought questions to my mind because it said there are actual physical differences in the brain. You lose your power to think if you don't ever think. And so those are things we need to think about. It's not just, we need to acknowledge the importance of artificial intelligence, and we need to figure out how we can use that well, but we need to be careful. It's not just ethical concerns, but it's also student thinking concerns. And certainly we know student thinking is a part of inquiry. So we've got to figure out how those fit together. How do we make sure that our learners have freedom of thought in this technology-driven information environment? Well, that's an appropriate question for adults as well as for students. Are we so caught up in the information world that we're unduly influenced by others' opinions and that we really don't seek the diverse opinions that we know we should? I find myself sometimes falling into that trap myself. I have some opinions about what's going on, and I don't want to read people who don't think that way, but I really have a responsibility to do that and to respect different viewpoints. So this is going to be a struggle, especially especially in the United States right now. So this is an area where I think we can all think about and figure out together. And one thing that Daryl and I both are interested in is affecting international change in school librarianship. I know we all come from different perspectives. Some come from more of an educational environment, some from a library environment. And it's different in every country. We have certainly champions in a number of countries here today, and thank you. And we need to learn from you and build on what you know. So that's part of affecting international change, is engaging in conversation that goes beyond our particular perspective, but acknowledges that this is being explored across the world, and we have a lot to learn from each other. So the final thing is, I know some of you may have questions, and I think we have just a few minutes if anyone has questions that you want to ask.
Thank you so much, Barbara. You've rounded off our day perfectly. You can, by all means, ask questions in the chat box. Well, I don't even know what I'm talking about now. Somebody's just asked if she can actually ask a question, but I'm not sure that I have got you set up that you can do that. If I can do that briefly, let me just see if I can change settings. No, I'm afraid I can't do it easily. Oh, is this one? Allow participants to unmute themselves. Okay. All right. You're all unmuted. Let's see how this works. If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, then please feel free to. Ruth, now's your chance. Not that I've put you on the spot.
Not at all. No. I think I may have still had the opportunity to unmute myself before. Let me start my. Oh no, I won't start my video. That's too much. Barbara, really brilliant to hear from you again. I am both inspired and terrified, and I suspect that there are many people on the call now or listening later who, Elizabeth and I often talk about isolation and the isolation of librarians. This forum and this opportunity to talk together is fantastic, but rare. I'm well aware that we can share through the FOSIL group, but how do you see, you're talking about, sorry, this is rambly, you're talking about improving the kind of, or raising the international status of inquiry. How can we be part of that? How can we make sure that we are sharing with each other? You know, there are 1,000 organizations which we could be part of, national and international. Where should we be to make sure we're having those correct conversations?
Well, that's a really good question, Ruth. That's one reason that Daryl was so impassioned about developing the IAI, because that institute, we don't have it all set up yet, but the idea behind that Institute for the Advancement of Inquiry is that we will have a way to share across countries, and that we will be able to contribute our ideas, listen to other ideas, push back, learn, have resources added to it. So you are absolutely right that one-on-one conversations are great, but really if we want the international perspective, we all need to be able to participate. So I don't know, Daryl may want to speak more about the Institute, but that's my understanding of what we're going to accomplish. Any minute now.
While we're waiting for Daryl maybe to come back on, would anybody else like to unmute themselves and ask a question rather than typing in the last few minutes that we have?
Well, I'm here and then I'll get out of the way quickly. So Barbara was absolutely spot on. The whole point about the Institute is to find a more effective way to make things like this happen more often, and maybe even in ways that we can't even imagine yet. So I did just want to say earlier, which I actually forgot, there were two things in relation to that. The first one was that, as Barbara said, we haven't got everything figured out. Stuff is in motion. The Institute does exist as a legal person. And I'm absolutely delighted to announce that both Diane, who got us going this morning, and Barbara, who is drawing today to a close, have agreed to serve on the advisory board of the Institute. So as soon as we recover from the symposium, we can begin to put some thought into practically what the next steps are going to be, who we need to involve, how we need to involve them to take this really important work that we're doing forward onto the next level. The other thing that I did just want to mention is that there might also be ways to combine, say, maybe more frequent opportunities to meet and to share like this, but also to combine that maybe with opportunities to meet in person, because I think, as Ruth did point out, if we had an opportunity to be together physically, as well as to be together online, that would almost certainly deepen and accelerate certain things. One of the reasons why we wanted to be online only for the first symposium was to make it as easy as possible for as many people as possible to be able to attend and to participate. We deliberately chose a Saturday, which is inconvenient for all of us to a greater or less extent, but probably not as inconvenient as needing to motivate time off during school, to get permission, to find cover, to inconvenience colleagues, and to inconvenience students. So yeah, very definitely be moving forward with that deliberately as soon as the symposium is behind us.
A trip to Guernsey's on the cards then, is it, Daryl?
Or off Guernsey.
York's a nice place. Right, are there any more questions